Hola muchachos y muchachas. Welcome to Veracruz, officially called Heroica Veracruz, but most often referred to by the locals in the area as Puerto Veracruz, which means the port of Veracruz. This is probably called Puerto Veracruz because it is not only the main port in the state of Veracruz, but it is the main port in the entire country, or the most important one. And it is also the first port in the country of Mexico. As you can see, there's a lot of beautiful Spanish architecture in Veracruz, and that's because this is the area where the Spanish conquistadors first arrived in Mexico. The Spanish captain Juan de Grijalva, along with Bernal Diaz del Castillo, first arrived in 1518 at the island later known as San Juan de Ulua. The Spanish gave it that name, or at least the San Juan part, because they landed on the Christian feast of John the Baptist, which is June 24th, and in honor of the captain, Juan de Grijalva. De Ulua is derived from the local name for the Aztecs, Coluja or Acoluja. According to tradition, when the Spanish arrived, they found two young men who had been sacrificed. When they asked the locals what had happened, they said the Aztecs had ordered the sacrifice. The word for Aztec evolved into Ulua. Because the first expedition of the Spaniards detected the presence of gold in the region, a second expedition under the command of Hernan Cortez arrived in 1519. Cortez then founded a city here, which he named Villa de la Veracruz, referring to the area's gold and dedicated to the true cross, because he landed on the Christian holy day of Good Friday, the day of the crucifixion. When Cortez and his soldiers abolished the Aztec despotism and elected a Justicia Mayor and a Capitan General, they created the first city council on the American continent. It was the first Spanish settlement on the mainland of the Americas to receive the coat of arms. A coat of arms is an insignia used to designate an independent city or state. The port of Veracruz is the oldest and largest port in Mexico and is deeply important to its history. During the colonial period, it was the most important port in all of New Spain, which is today Latin America. The connection to ports in the Atlantic trade, creating a large, wealthy merchant class, which was more prosperous than that of Mexico City. From the port of Veracruz were exported turkeys, corn, beans, avocados, and cotton, all the way back to Spain. And then from Spain came fava beans, wheat, rice, cattle, pigs, fabric, wine, and other goods. In the mid-16th century, so much gold and silver was found in Veracruz that these precious metals were the chief export to Spain on what were called treasure ships. This bounty attracted pirates, mostly from Britain and Holland, such as Francis Drake and John Hawkins, who preyed on these treasure ships. Veracruz was invaded during conflicts with France and the United States. And it was because of all this unwanted attention that fortifications were built around the city, including Fort San Juan de Ulua. This was during the 19th and early 20th century, so the early 1900s. As was also the case in other parts of Mexico, the indigenous people of this area of Veracruz suffered from the epidemics of European infectious diseases, which decimated the population after contact. The Spanish began to import African slaves via the port of Veracruz to work on sugarcane plantations. In the 16th century, this state had more slaves than any other part of Mexico. Before the slave trade was abolished, Mexico had the second highest population of African slaves in the Americas, following Brazil. The 19th century was marked by armed conflicts. During the Mexican War of Independence, Spain placed troops here to maintain Mexico City's sea link with Spain. In 1816, Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna commanded royalist troops countering the insurgency, the rebels. In 1820, the insurgents took the city, despite Santa Anna's attempt to stop them. The last viceroy of New Spain, Juan O'Donoghue, arrived here in 1821, where he signed the Treaty of Cordoba with Agustín de Iturbide at Fort San Juan de Ulua. In 1823, Spanish troops remaining at Fort San Juan de Ulua fired on the newly independent Mexican city of Veracruz. The city's defenses against the attack earned its first title of Heroic City. During the Pastry War in 1837, the city mounted a defense against a French attack and earned its second title of Heroic City. During 1914, during the Tampico Affair, U.S. troops occupied the city for 7 months. So the city of Veracruz has a very dense and complicated history, but the same can be said for its culture. The city is very warm, and so are the people, who are very lively. Veracruz has a blend of cultures: indigenous, ethnic Spanish, and Afro-Cuban. The influence of these three is best seen in the food and music of the area, which has a strong Hispanic, Caribbean, and African influences. Because of its importance as Mexico's principal Caribbean and Atlantic seaport, Veracruz has always been a locus for the mixture of different cultures. During the colonial period, African slaves were imported to work in the fields and shipyards. And since Mexico's independence from Spain in 1821, immigrants from Italy and Cuba have settled in the city. Sugar and rum production have been mainstays as commodities. During colonial times, they were produced by slave labor, and later immigrants often entered labor and industrial jobs. Together, these ethnic groups have created rich culture. The Naval Academy of Mexico attracts both Mexican and international sailors and officers, adding to the cosmopolitan mix of the city. The city has a reputation for being lively, with many people out in the squares listening to music late into the night. In the morning, they frequent sidewalk cafes for their morning coffee. In the latter half of the 19th century, Veracruz's importance waned as trade to Europe diminished. The port was refurbished at the beginning of the 20th century, but petroleum production was now the primary income for the state rather than the port. But this began to change in the later half of the 20th century, and the port surged back to the state's economic forefront. In 1991, the federal government took over the port of Veracruz and implemented many improvements with machinery that made the port more efficient for the handling of merchandise. Later that same year, the first private shipping companies began operations. In 1993, the Law of Ports was passed, regularizing the operations of ports in the country. This law created the Administración Portuaria de Veracruz, the Port Authority of Veracruz. In the 2000s, the port continued to handle all kinds of cargo, moving 16.1 million tons of products in 2004. This figure is expected to rise once modernization efforts have continued and completed, especially a truck bypass that leads directly from the highway to the port. Veracruz is the gateway for Mexico's automotive industry, which is concentrated in the center of the country, in the states around Mexico City. This port has several advantages. It is the first to be equipped specifically for shipping automobiles. Located on the south central coast, Veracruz is closer to car manufacturers and has better access to both imports and export markets in the US, Europe, and Central and South America relative to the other Mexican ports. In 2004, the port handled 70% of the automobiles exported from Mexico, with traffic expected to rise. The port authorities unveiled a program to enlarge the port's infrastructure and expand operations beginning in 2010. However, conversions of port area for tourism challenges operations. The port handles 700,000 to 800,000 vehicles per year, the largest amount on the continent. The food from Veracruz is one of the most distinctive of Mexico's varied cuisines. Seafood and spices are the hallmark of this rich culinary tradition. Huachinango a la Veracruzana is a red snapper prepared in a spicy tomato sauce. It is one of the specialties to try along with arroz a la tumbada, a rice dish baked with seafood, and caldo de mariscos, a seafood stew, which is said to be a great hangover remedy. So I hope you guys enjoyed this tour in history of Veracruz. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button. This will help the channel out. You can also leave a comment and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Personally, I quite enjoyed visiting Veracruz just because of how friendly and warm and lively the people were.
No sabía.
Nah.
No, tómame otra que quedé horrible con mi diente. Vamos a tomarnos otra que quedé fea. A ver.
And it's also just a beautiful city to visit with the architecture and the history. There's some free museums, some paid museums, including San Juan de Ulua, which is the fortress which became a prison during the Mexican Revolution and is today a museum, although it was closed at the time that I was there in early 2021. But yeah, overall a great city to visit, in a also great state to visit of Veracruz in general. So I have more videos of the city of Veracruz coming up, including Boca del Rio, the quote-unquote new Veracruz, and of other cool places to visit in the state, including Jalapa, Coatepec, Jico, and more. So there'll be a link to the playlist that contains all those videos in the description below, as well as a playlist of the first time I was in Mexico 3 years ago, bicycling through western and central Mexico. So those two playlists are linked in the description below the video. That first time I was in Mexico was part of a larger trip, bicycling through Latin America from Canada all the way down to southern Patagonia in Chile and Argentina. And after that, I bicycled through Eastern Africa and Eastern Europe. And I have video playlists for all of those countries available on this same channel, Hum of the Earth. And if you'd like to see an interactive map of everywhere that I went and everything that I got to see and do, I have that interactive map available over on my website, followthehumoftheearth.com, where you can click on the different locations and see the various blog posts and videos that I've made of those places. And if you'd like to follow my continuing adventures through Eastern Mexico and beyond, you can do so by clicking on the red subscribe button and clicking on the bell to be notified when new videos come out. Alright, so that's going to do it. Hope you guys enjoyed. Have a good one.